I am live. It is Sunday the 23rd of August today, and I am reading Gay Hendricks' 5 Wishes. I have read I have read wish number 1, and then an interlude which was entitled Then Along Came a Miracle, and I am now on his second wish, chapter 2. My second wish, completing. My second wish was all about completing. Tying up as many loose ends in my life, I soon discovered a magical surprise. Any significant act of completion unleashes a power, a hidden power, a rocket fuel for manifesting your heart's desire. Every time I completed anything that had an emotional charge, I liberated a new wave of energy that increased my velocity towards my cherished goals. The dictionary says that completion is finishing something and making it whole. I learned how much of my energy and power was being consumed by the things I'd left unfinished and unwhole. I discovered how much energy, lightness, and power I could feel by completing things and making them and myself whole. Here's how I first phrased my wish. I wish I'd said all the things I never got around to saying to my friends and extended family. I wish I'd confessed the secrets I was holding. I wish I told some people how much I loved and appreciated them. I wish I told my daughter how sad I felt that I'd broken some promises to her. Here's how I turned my wish into a goal. My life is a complete success because I live in a state of completion with all my friends and family. I say all the important things I need to say and do all the important things I need to do. As I go through life, there's nothing significant I leave unsaid or undone. How it was then. I come from a family of refugees and runaways. I had never seen this aspect of my lineage clearly until I formed my second wish. I chose this wish because I felt the pressure and weight of many things I'd run away from and left undone over the years. As a kid, I lived near the railroad tracks, and I don't think I ever saw a train go by without wishing I could be on it. It wasn't until I was in my 50s that I found my true home, both inside myself and in the part of the world I lived in. Before that, I'd always felt like I was on my way to someplace else, and the sooner the better. Once I began handling the many incompletions I'd left by the wayside in my past, I realized I had been following the well-worn pattern of a family script. In doing some detective work on the pattern, I discovered that both my father and my maternal grandfather had run away from home when they were 16, around 1890. My grandfather stole a mule from the family farm and rode off to seek his fortune in the newly settled territory of Central Florida. The reason he always gave for his escape from the farm is both funny and insightful. Farming, he would say, will either kill you at a young age or make you tough enough to live to a ripe old age. Death at an early age or a long life as a farmer seem about equal in my book. The clear message I took from this: if you don't like something, get out, leave it behind, and don't look back. My father ran away from home by hopping a freight train. According to stories I heard from my mother, he had grown up in a terribly abusive family. His father carried a Bible in one hand and a bullwhip in the other, and used them interchangeably. Finally, one day, he stowed away on a railway car, intending to take it from Alabama to Florida, but he got caught and thrown off the train. The same thing happened 2 or 3 more times until finally the engineer gave him a job on the train as a locomotive stoker. In those days, the steam engines ran on coal and sometimes wood. The stoker's hot and dirty job was to watch the fire and keep it roaring. Although I never knew my father in the flesh, I saw many pictures of him wearing his striped railroad cap. Going back even further, I descended from Protestants who were forced to flee parts of Europe because of the Huguenots' persecution of the 18th century. At one point, King Louis of France, a rabid Catholic, passed a law making it legal to persecute Protestants. Suddenly, it was okay to steal from Protestants, even beat them on the street with no punishment. This new law did not bring out the compassionate side of the Catholics, and many of the Protestants fled to England and other points west. My European ancestors migrated to England and Scotland, and then came to America and took root in the South. They became successful in business and the plantation economy, only to find themselves on the losing side of the Civil War. They lost their land and businesses and fled farther south to start again in the jungles of Florida at the end of the 19th century. Within this general refugee script were many smaller dramas that involved running away. My two aunts ran away from home to get married in order to escape the wrath of my grandmother, who did not approve of the men they loved. Both of these marriages endured for more than 40 years, during which time my grandmother forgave her two daughters, but steadfastly refused to speak to their husbands. You can see why Southerners tend to make such good novelists. All they have to do is write down what's going on around them. When I was 19, my grandfather, the former mule chief, slipped me $500 and told me to get the hell out of the swamplands before they swallowed me up. I took his advice, bought a beat-up 58 Ford for $175, pointed it north, and never looked back. Geographical liberation is one thing, but internal freedom is something else indeed. Escaping to New England and later to California changed the scenery, but only reinforced my habit of not completing significant emotional communications. By the time I was in my 30s and had my life-changing conversation with Ed, I had piled up such a stack of incomplete communications and unmade amends that I felt as though I was collapsing under the weight of them. How it is now. One day, not long after my meeting with Ed, I sat down and made a list of all the incompletions I could think of. I broke them down into categories: unspoken truths, significant things I'd withheld from the significant people in my life, broken agreements, promises I'd made and hadn't kept, people I appreciated and loved but hadn't told recently, directly, money I owed. I wish I still had my original handwritten list, because I'm sure there were a few other categories I don't remember. The list was 12 pages long. By the time I finished writing down all the things I'd left incomplete throughout my life, it seemed daunting when I looked at the list as a whole. But I was soon to discover something remarkable about the act of making completions. Each one you take care of gives you a fresh burst of energy. If the completion is a major one, such as a big lie you finally admit to, the liberation of energy feels like rebirth. The power of this phenomenon cannot be overstated. Why had I never heard of it before? Surely others must have tapped into the power of completion throughout history. But if they had, I certainly hadn't run across any descriptions of it. This discovery seems to me something that ought to be flashed across TV screens, awarded Nobel Prizes, and taught in every grade of school. Instead, I only learned it in my 30s by a chance encounter with an esoteric teacher. I set about the task of completing the incompletions, starting with the ones I felt more resistant to doing. I figured if I did the hard ones first, the easier ones would feel like eating dessert. The harder ones were lies and broken promises to a number of women in my life, including my daughter and her mother, my long ago first wife. Linda and I were together for a little over 4 years, but they were probably the most unconscious 4 years of my life. I met and married her when I was 22, just after my grandmother died. Looking back, I think I felt completely alone and without a source of love when my grandmother died. I remember just sitting in my backyard for hours at a time, wondering what I was going to do with my life. Linda strayed into my stagnant sludge pond of grief, burdened by her own load of undigested feelings, and we stayed mired there for our short, unhappy time together. The only bright bit of sunshine to emerge from our union was our daughter, Amanda. Both of us adored her, and focusing our attention on our daughter enabled us to find some common ground between us. After a couple more years, though, we went our separate ways. Linda and Amanda moved a continent away, and I lost daily contact with Amanda. It was by far the most painful event of my life. Several incompletions with Linda and Amanda were at the top of my 12-page list. I contacted Linda and asked her if she wanted to hear them. When she said yes, I got into the car and drove cross-country so that I could sit down with her and then with Amanda face to face. By then, 10 years had gone by since our divorce, but when Linda and I sat together, it was as if no time had passed. I told her about the process I'd gone through that had led me to make my list of incompletions. I asked her again if she wanted to hear them, and she said yes. I began a sweaty but liberating hour of divulging secrets, feelings and other unspoken pieces from our lives together. I told her how angry I was that she had used Amanda as a pawn, punishing me by withholding visits for things she was mad at me for that were unrelated to Amanda. I told her about a one-night stand I'd had and the puny justification for it, retaliation for one I suspected her of having. I expressed appreciation to her for taking care of Amanda by herself after our split up. I'm sure there were plenty of other things I told her that day, but those are the ones I can remember now. People often ask me how to know whether an incompletion is significant enough to share with the other person. I used one main criterion for deciding if I should communicate it. Is the other person likely to have an emotional reaction to it? If so, I definitely need to share it. If I think it's likely that the person will be angry or hurt or happy to hear it, I found it's best to get it out into the light. Knowing what to share with my daughter was more complicated. I was going she was going through puberty at the time, and I knew she had enough on her mind. The major incompletions I had with her, though, seemed possibly useful to her in navigating the tricky passage she was going through. So I took the risk and asked her if she would sit down with me for a heart-to-heart talk. She agreed. We met at her favorite restaurant, and I told her my big ones. I told her how guilty I felt about leaving her behind to be raised without my daily support. I told her it was that was the only major promise I'd ever broken, but it had pained me nearly every day of my life for almost 13 years. I told her I felt sad that on many occasions I'd expressed anger to her that was actually anger I That was actually anger I felt towards her mother. As I spoke about this, I realized the same pattern had played out between my mother and me. She always seemed so angry with me for reasons I could never figure out. Now it seems to make sense. It was anger she felt toward my father, but didn't know how to express. She must have been so furious at my father for dying young and leaving her in the lurch. She also must have felt afraid all the time. Taking care of a new baby is never easy, but being a poor widow in the backwoods of Central Florida in the 1940s must have been especially hard. I felt a wave of compassion and forgiveness wash over me. Sitting in the corner of the restaurant, Amanda and I cried together and bonded in a way we hadn't in a long time. So I finish this here and continue soon.